Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Howard Rourke stood at the kitchen counter at exactly 6:45 a.m., the same time he prepared Mason's lunch for the past 3 years. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, peanut butter spread evenly across whole wheat bread, strawberry jam applied in careful strokes, crusts removed because Mason claimed they tasted like cardboard. The warehouse night shift had ended at 6 a.m., leaving Howard's body tired but his mind alert. 12 hours of organizing shipments and managing loading crews kept him sharp. He'd learned long ago that attention to detail meant the difference between order and chaos. "Dad, did you remember my chess club permission slip?" Mason sat at the breakfast table, his rescue inhaler positioned within easy reach beside his orange juice. The boy's sandy hair stuck up at odd angles despite Howard's attempt to comb it down. "In your folder, behind your math homework." Howard zipped the insulated lunch bag with its familiar blue stripe. "And your backup inhaler?" Mason patted the front pocket of his jeans. "Got it, plus the one in my backpack. 3 inhalers total." Howard insisted on redundancy when it came to Mason's asthma. The condition had developed when Mason was 7, shortly after his biological mother died in a car accident. Stress-induced, the doctors said. Children's bodies sometimes responded to trauma in unexpected ways. Rose appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in her navy blazer and matching skirt. Her real estate career demanded polished appearances and early client meetings. She moved with calculated precision, every gesture deliberate. "I could drop him off today." Howard paused, lunch bag halfway to Mason's backpack. Rose rarely volunteered for school runs. Her morning routine was sacred coffee while reading market reports, quick shower, office by 8:30 to prepare for client calls. "You sure? I don't mind taking him. I have a client meeting near the elementary school anyway." She grabbed her leather purse from the granite counter, checking her phone with practiced efficiency. Makes sense to combine trips. Mason looked between his parents, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "Can Dad take me instead? We were going to talk about my science project. Your stepmother offered, buddy." Howard handed Mason his backpack, noting the slight tension in the boy's shoulders. "We'll talk about the volcano experiment tonight." Rose smiled, but Howard caught something unsettling in her expression. Her eyes held a distance that hadn't been there yesterday. Marriage had taught him to read her moods, the slight tightening around her eyes when clients annoyed her, the way she pressed her lips together when bills arrived in the mail. This was different. Colder. "Ready, Mason?" The boy nodded reluctantly and followed Rose toward the garage. Howard watched through the kitchen window as they backed out of the driveway. Rose's hands gripped the steering wheel with unusual intensity, knuckles white against the black leather interior. Howard shook his head, attributing his unease to exhaustion. Night shifts left him paranoid about everything. Rose had been distant lately, but every marriage experienced rough patches. They'd weathered worse storms during their 3 years together. He poured himself coffee and settled at the kitchen table with shipping reports from the warehouse. Numbers provided comfort, concrete data that couldn't lie or hide motivations. Unlike people. The phone call shattered Howard's concentration at 11:47 a.m. He was reviewing discrepancies in a freight manifest when his cell phone buzzed against the wooden table. Olympia Elementary School flashed on the caller ID display. "Mr. Rourke? This is Principal Dole." Mason collapsed during recess. The shipping manifest slipped from Howard's hands, papers scattering across the floor. What happened? His asthma. He couldn't breathe properly. The inhaler didn't seem to work. Principal Dole's voice remained calm, but Howard heard the underlying concern. "The paramedics are here now." Howard was already moving toward his truck, phone pressed against his ear. "Is he conscious?" "Yes, but his oxygen levels dropped significantly. We're transporting him to St. Peter Hospital as a precaution." "I'm on my way." The drive to St. Peter Hospital normally took 18 minutes through Olympia's downtown traffic. Howard made it in 12, running 2 red lights and taking corners faster than his pickup truck appreciated. His hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel, Mason's pale face filling his imagination. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and fear. A nurse with kind eyes directed Howard to room 3, where Mason sat on an examination table wearing a child-sized hospital gown. A breathing mask covered the lower half of his small face. "Hey, buddy." Howard touched his son's shoulder, feeling the slight tremor in the thin frame. Mason pulled the mask away from his mouth, revealing lips that still held a faint blue tinge. "Dad, something was wrong with my inhaler. It felt like breathing air through a straw." Dr. Pemberton entered the room, a thin man with graying hair and intelligent eyes. He carried a chart thick with Mason's medical history. "We've stabilized him, Mr. Rourke, but I want to keep him for observation. His oxygen saturation dropped to dangerous levels." "Has this happened before?" Howard studied his son's face, searching for signs of continued distress. "Never this severe. Usually his rescue inhaler stops an attack within 2 to 3 minutes. Today it took nearly 15 minutes to get his breathing under control." Howard's phone buzzed. Rose's number appeared on the screen. "I need to take this." He stepped into the sterile hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Rose, I heard what happened." Her voice sounded flat, devoid of the concern he expected from a stepmother whose child had nearly died. "Where are you? Mason's been asking for you." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the hospital monitors beeping, footsteps echoing down corridors, muted conversations between medical staff. "Rose? Are you there? He's your responsibility, Howard. Always has been." The line went dead. Howard stared at his phone, the words echoing in his mind. In 3 years of marriage, Rose had never spoken about Mason with such detachment. She'd never been the most affectionate stepmother, but she'd always shown appropriate concern for his welfare. This felt different. He tried calling back immediately. The phone rang once before connecting to voicemail. Rose's professional voice instructed him to leave a message, and she'd return his call promptly. Howard returned to Mason's room, forcing his expression into calm lines. The boy was sipping apple juice through a straw, color slowly returning to his cheeks. "How you feeling now?" "Better." The breathing treatment helped. Mason set down his juice cup. "Where's Mom?" Howard hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She's dealing with work stuff. You know how busy she gets with client meetings." Mason nodded, but his eyes held a wariness that reminded Howard of his own childhood in group homes. Kids learned to read adult moods for survival. They noticed when something felt wrong, even if they couldn't articulate the source of their unease. Dr. Pemberton returned with discharge papers and a stern expression. "I want you to follow up with Mason's regular doctor within 48 hours. And make sure you have fresh rescue inhalers. The one he used today was new. I picked it up from the pharmacy last month." The doctor frowned, making notes in Mason's chart. Sometimes medications can fail due to manufacturing defects or storage issues. It's rare, but it happens. Howard signed the discharge papers, but doubt nagged at his mind. Mason had 3 rescue inhalers, 1 for school, 1 for home, 1 for the car, all filled at the same pharmacy on the same day, all supposedly containing identical medication. What were the odds that Mason's school inhaler would fail on the same day Rose offered to drive him to school for the first time in months? Aubrey Kane arrived at Howard's house that evening with a bottle of whiskey in her laptop bag. She'd driven straight from the warehouse after Howard called, concern evident in her usually confident demeanor. "Where's the kid?" she asked, settling at the kitchen table. "Upstairs doing homework. His breathing's back to normal, but the doctor wants him to take it easy for a few days. And Rose still hasn't come home. Won't answer her phone." Aubrey opened her laptop with practiced efficiency. "Tell me exactly what happened." Every detail. Howard recounted the morning's events, Rose's unusual offer to drive Mason, the failed inhaler, her cold response to the emergency. Aubrey listened without interruption, fingers already dancing across the keyboard. "You said she's been acting strange lately, distant, more than usual." Howard poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. "She used to at least pretend to care about Mason. Now she barely acknowledges he exists." "How distant?" Howard considered the question. "Last month, she stopped cooking dinner for us. Said she was too busy with work. But I found takeout containers in her car from restaurants she never mentioned visiting." "Secret meetings?" "Maybe. She's also been going to bed later, staying up on her laptop. When I ask what she's working on, she says client research. Aubrey's fingers flew across the keyboard. Give me her full name, social security number, and birth date. If she's hiding something, there'll be digital traces. Howard provided the information, feeling like he was betraying someone who might have already betrayed him. Aubrey worked in silence for 40 minutes, occasionally muttering curses at the screen. Found something interesting. She turned the laptop toward Howard. Your wife opened 3 new bank accounts in the past 6 months, all at different financial institutions. How much money are we talking about? $47,000 moved between accounts, all withdrawn from your joint savings. Aubrey clicked to another screen. But here's the real kicker. She increased Mason's life insurance policy 2 months ago. Howard's whiskey glass slipped from his hand, amber liquid splashing across the table. She did what? Increased his coverage from $50,000 to $300,000. Premium policy with accidental death benefits. Accidental death benefits. Pays double if the insured dies in an accident, like a severe asthma attack. The kitchen walls seemed to close in around Howard. He'd married a woman who had taken out a $600,000 life insurance policy on his 10-year-old son. The same son whose rescue inhaler had mysteriously failed that morning. There's more, Aubrey said quietly. I found encrypted email accounts. She's been communicating with someone regularly for the past 3 months. Who? Working on breaking the encryption. But Howard. Aubrey closed the laptop and looked directly at him. This isn't sudden desperation. Your wife has been planning something for months. The next morning brought another call from Principal Dole. Mr. Rourke, could you come in this morning? There's something I need to show you regarding yesterday's incident. Howard arranged for Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor, to watch Mason. The boy was staying home from school as a precaution, though his breathing remained stable. Are you in trouble, Dad? Mason asked as Howard grabbed his truck keys. No, buddy. Principal Dole just wants to discuss what happened yesterday. Will you tell her about my inhaler not working? Already did. That's probably what she wants to talk about. Howard drove to Olympia Elementary, his mind racing through possibilities. Had Mason done something wrong before his attack? Was the school questioning Howard's parenting? Were they concerned about liability? Principal Dole met him in the main office. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd run the school for 8 years without a single serious incident. Parents respected her fairness, and teachers appreciated her unwavering support. Mr. Rourke, thank you for coming. She gestured toward a small room lined with security monitors. After Mason's incident yesterday, I reviewed our surveillance footage as part of standard protocol. The monitoring room contained 6 screens showing different areas of the school: hallways, entrances, the playground, and the cafeteria. Principal Dole sat at the central console and pulled up archived footage. We have comprehensive security here, she explained. Every entrance, every hallway, every common area. The school board installed this system 3 years ago after that incident in Seattle. She queued up footage from the previous morning, timestamped showing 8:15 a.m. The main hallway appeared on screen, empty except for early arriving staff members unlocking classrooms. Watch the corner there. She pointed to the left side of the screen that a figure appeared, moving quickly down the hallway. Female, average height, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and an oversized winter coat despite the mild October weather. The woman kept her head down, face hidden from the camera angles. She entered through the side door near the gymnasium. That door should have been locked, and she would have needed the security code to open it. Howard leaned closer to the monitor. Did you get a clear view of her face? No. She was very careful about camera placement. But watch this. Principal Dole fast-forwarded the footage. She goes directly to Mason's classroom, stays for exactly 37 seconds, then leaves the same way she came. The timestamp showed 8:22 a.m., 7 minutes from entry to exit. I've already contacted the police, but I wanted you to see this first. Principal Dole paused the video on the clearest shot of the intruder. Do you recognize anything about her? Howard studied the frozen image. The woman's posture seemed familiar, the way she held her shoulders, the confident stride, despite the obvious attempt at concealment. Something about her movement pattern triggered recognition. Can you play it again? Slower this time. Principal Dole restarted the footage at half speed. This time, Howard focused on subtle details. The woman's gait revealed a slight favor of her left foot. The expensive handbag visible beneath the oversized coat. The way she moved through the hallway with obvious familiarity. His blood turned to ice water. That's my wife. Are you absolutely certain? Howard nodded, his throat suddenly dry. Rose broke her ankle in a skiing accident 2 years ago. She still walks with that slight limp when she's tired or stressed. And that handbag, I bought it for her last Christmas. Principal Dole made careful notes on a yellow legal pad. What would she have been doing in Mason's classroom? I don't know. But even as he spoke, Howard remembered Mason's failed inhaler. The timing felt too precise for coincidence. We'll need to involve the police immediately, Principal Dole said gently. Howard stared at the frozen image of his wife entering his son's classroom with obvious criminal intent. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of shared meals, holiday celebrations, and quiet conversations about their future together. All of it crumbling in a 7-minute security video. Mr. Rourke, do it. Call them. Detective Orrin Chase arrived at the school within 30 minutes. He was a methodical man in his late 40s who approached investigations with the patience of someone who'd learned that truth emerged slowly, one verified fact at a time. Howard provided his statement, while Principal Dole made copies of the security footage. Chase asked detailed questions about Rose's behavior, their marriage, and any recent changes in her routine. Has your wife shown any unusual interest in Mason's medical condition recently? She's always been aware of his asthma, but she's never been directly involved in managing it. That's my responsibility. Any financial stress in your household? Howard hesitated. We're comfortable. I make decent money at the warehouse, and Rose's real estate business has been growing. But she has been secretive about money lately. New accounts, unexplained expenses. I thought it was related to work. Chase made notes in his small notebook. Where's your wife now? I don't know. She hasn't been home since yesterday morning. We'll need to bring her in for questioning. Howard drove home in a daze, the security footage playing repeatedly in his mind. By the time he reached his driveway, anger had replaced shock. Rose had violated the sanctity of Mason's school, potentially endangering other children in pursuit of whatever twisted plan she'd conceived. She was waiting in the kitchen when he entered the house. Rose sat at the table, still wearing yesterday's business clothes. Her makeup had smudged slightly, and her usually perfect hair showed signs of stress. She looked up when Howard entered, her expression unreadable. We need to talk. The police are looking for you. I know. Rose poured herself a glass of wine from a bottle Howard didn't recognize. Principal Dole, call my office. Howard studied his wife's face, searching for any trace of the woman he'd married. They have security footage of you in Mason's classroom. I'm sure they do. Her calm admission hit Howard like a physical blow. You're not going to deny it. Would you believe me if I did? Try me. Rose took a measured sip of wine, considering her words. Some things can't be explained in ways that make sense to other people. Howard. They just are. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Howard felt something fundamental break inside his chest. What did you do to his inhaler? You don't have the whole picture. Then explain it to me. Rose stood and walked to the kitchen window, gazing out at the backyard where Mason had played for 3 years. Do you know what it's like to live a life that isn't yours? To wake up every morning and pretend to be someone you're not. Everyone pretends sometimes. Not pretends, Howard. Lie's a complete lie. She turned to face him. I've been living your life, not mine. Taking care of your son, managing your household, playing the role of devoted wife and stepmother. No one forced you to marry me, didn't they? Rose's laugh held no humor. My family expected me to settle down. I was 32 and single, a disappointment to parents who'd already given up hope for grandchildren. You represented stability, responsibility, everything they said I needed. And Mason was part of the package. A damaged child who needed constant attention and medical management. Do you know what my friends think when I tell them about rescue inhalers and emergency room visits? Howard's hands clenched into fists. He's a good kid. He's a burden. An expensive, time-consuming burden that ties you to a life of limitation. I'm taking him and leaving. Good. Rose finished her wine and set the glass in the sink with deliberate precision. Maybe now you'll both be happy. The words carried no emotion, no regret. She might have been discussing weekend plans or grocery lists. 3 years, Rose. 3 years I've tried to make this work. And I've tried to be something I'm not. She moved toward the staircase. I'll be gone by morning. Keep the house. Howard watched her climb the stairs, each footfall echoing through the home they'd built together. He pulled out his phone and called Aubrey. We need to talk. Tonight. Aubrey arrived within the hour, bringing takeout Chinese food and her forensic accounting skills. She'd spent the afternoon digging deeper into Rose's financial activities while Howard dealt with police interviews. Where's Mason? She asked, settling at the kitchen table with her laptop. Playing video games upstairs. I told him Rose had to travel for work emergencies. How much does he know? Nothing yet. But he's smart. He'll figure out something's wrong soon enough. Aubrey opened her laptop and pulled up several financial spreadsheets. I found more accounts. Your wife has been very busy hiding money. Howard joined her at the table, studying the complex web of transactions displayed on the screen. How much are we talking about total? Close to $70,000. Moved through 6 different banks over the past 8 months. Aubrey highlighted specific transactions. But here's the interesting part. She's been receiving regular payments from an outside source. What kind of payments? $5,000 monthly for the past 6 months. All from the same shell company, Pacific Northwest Investments. Howard recognized the name. That's Julian Ames's company. Rose's ex-boyfriend from college. The guy who moved to Olympia 5 years ago. That's him. Rose said they were just friends. But Howard trailed off, remembering Rose's occasional mentions of business opportunities and investment advice that Aubrey's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm finding email trails between them. Encrypted, but not well enough to hide from someone who knows what to look for. What do they say? Give me a few more minutes. While Aubrey worked, Howard called Detective Chase to report Rose's admission and her intention to disappear. Chase assured him that airport and border security had been notified, though Rose had a significant head start if she chose to run. Got it. Aubrey turned the laptop toward Howard. Your wife and Julian have been planning this for 6 months. Look at this email from July. The message appeared on screen in Rose's familiar writing style. Timeline needs acceleration. Target window in October aligns with seasonal factors. Medical intervention should appear natural. Medical intervention. Howard's voice came out as a whisper. There's more. Aubrey scrolled to another message. This one from August. Insurance documentation complete. Beneficiary changes filed. Contingency plans for custody transfer established. Custody transfer. Aubrey pulled up additional files. Howard, she wasn't just planning to collect insurance money. She was planning to frame you for negligent homicide. The words hit Howard like a sledgehammer. Frame me. Look at these draft documents. Aubrey displayed a series of Word files. Medical reports claiming you ignored Mason's symptoms. Witness statements from fictional neighbors reporting your indifference to Mason's health needs. Even a fake journal supposedly written by Mason describing his fear that you didn't care about his asthma. Howard pushed back from the table, the room spinning around him. She was going to kill Mason and send me to prison. 2 birds, 1 stone. She gets the insurance money and removes the only person who could challenge her story. How long would I have served? Aubrey consulted another document. With a good lawyer? Maybe 15 years for negligent homicide. Without one? Could have been life. That evening, after Mason had finished his homework and eaten dinner, he approached Howard with a worried expression and a small notebook clutched in his hands. Dad, I need to show you something. I've been thinking about it since yesterday. They sat together on the living room couch, the same place where Howard had read Mason bedtime stories for 3 years. The boy opened his notebook to pages filled with careful 10-year-old handwriting. I started writing down weird things Mom said when she thought I wasn't listening. Stuff that seemed. Mason searched for the right word. Wrong. Howard's chest tightened as he saw the dates spanning several weeks. What kind of stuff? Mason flipped to an entry dated 3 weeks earlier. She was on the phone in the kitchen real late. I came down for water because I couldn't sleep, but she didn't see me. Howard read Mason's careful transcription. She said, "Daddy might leave you, but you'll be okay. Sometimes people just disappear and never come back." Then she said something about me being better off without complications. Complications? I think she meant my asthma. Mason turned to another page. This one was last week when I was pretending to sleep on the couch. The entry read, she was talking to someone on her laptop. She said sometimes accidents just happen, even to good kids, especially sick kids who can't take care of themselves. Howard's hands trembled as he turned through more pages. Rose's words, recorded in his son's meticulous handwriting, painted a picture of systematic psychological manipulation. She'd been preparing Mason for his own death. Did she ever say these things when I was around? Never. Only when we were alone. Mason closed the notebook and looked directly at his father. "Dad, I think Mom wanted something bad to happen to me." Howard pulled his son close, feeling the small body tremble against his chest. "You're safe now. I promise you're safe. Are we going to see Mom again?" "I don't think so, buddy." "Good," Mason whispered. "She scared me. I didn't want to tell you because I thought maybe I was imagining things." "You weren't imagining anything, and you did the right thing by writing it down." Howard held his son until the trembling stopped, rage building in his chest like a forest fire. Rose hadn't just planned to kill Mason, she'd tortured him psychologically for weeks, planting seeds of fear and abandonment in a child's vulnerable mind. 2 days later, Howard received a call from an unknown number while he was at the warehouse organizing the morning shift. "Mr. Rourke? My name is Patricia Hillman. I saw the news about your son's incident at school." Howard recognized the surname. "Hillman, you work for Julian Ames?" "I was his administrative assistant until last month. I quit because of what I discovered about his business practices." Patricia's voice carried nervous tension. "I think there's something you should know about your wife's relationship with Julian." They arranged to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, away from Julian's office and Rose's real estate firm. Patricia arrived 10 minutes early, constantly checking the windows and door like she expected pursuit. She was a nervous woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. "I brought documentation," she said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "What kind of documentation?" "Evidence that Julian and your wife paid bribes to school district employees. Specifically, a man named Brett Kozlov who sits on the facilities committee." Howard opened the envelope and found bank records, email printouts, and handwritten notes. What did they pay him for? Access to security codes and maintenance schedules for Olympia Elementary. Brett has administrative access to all the security systems. When did this happen? 3 weeks ago. $5,000 in cash, delivered by your wife personally. Patricia pointed to a bank withdrawal slip. Julian documented everything because he was nervous about the illegal nature of the transaction. Howard studied a photocopy of Rose's handwriting. Target date, Tuesday morning. Duration, 10 minutes maximum. No witnesses. Tuesday morning, the day Mason collapsed. "Why are you telling me this?" Howard asked. "Because I have grandchildren. If someone did to them what your wife planned for Mason." Patricia gathered her purse. "Julian's been liquidating assets all week. I think he's planning to disappear." "Where is he now?" "His office, but not for long. He's been burning documents and transferring money to offshore accounts." Patricia stood to leave, then turned back. "Mr. Rourke, your wife isn't just cold. She's genuinely dangerous." Julian was afraid of her by the end. Howard took Patricia's evidence directly to Detective Chase, who reviewed the documents with growing concern. "This gives us enough for surveillance on Julian Ames," Chase said finally. "If he's planning to run, we need to intercept him first." "What about Rose?" "We'll find her. But right now, Ames is our best lead for understanding the full scope of this conspiracy." Chase assigned a surveillance team to Julian's office and apartment. Within 24 hours, they had their breakthrough. Julian met with Rose at a remote diner outside Olympia's city limits. Chase's team positioned recording equipment in the adjacent booth and a directional microphone in the parking lot. Howard listened to the conversation from Detective Chase's office, his hands clenched into fists as Rose's voice came through the speakers with crystal clarity. "You're losing your nerve," Rose said without preamble. "The kid almost died. That wasn't supposed to happen. The plan was whatever it took to get clean access to the insurance money. You said it would look like natural causes. A gradual deterioration of his condition, not a sudden collapse at school. It would have looked natural if you hadn't insisted on using saline solution instead of something more permanent." Howard's blood ran cold. Rose spoke about murdering Mason like she was discussing stock options. The saline replacement was supposed to make his inhaler ineffective, not nearly kill him in front of 30 witnesses. Julian protested. And it worked perfectly. His rescue inhaler failed when he needed it most. If you hadn't panicked and called the ambulance so quickly, the boy would have died from respiratory failure. But he didn't die. No, thanks to your lack of commitment. Rose's voice hardened. "Do you understand how much planning went into this? The insurance policy changes, the medical documentation, the character assassination materials I prepared for Howard." Character assassination? 3 separate incidents where Howard supposedly ignored Mason's symptoms. Medical negligence reports backdated over 6 months. Witness statements from neighbors claiming Howard was an unfit father. Howard listened in horror as Rose detailed her plan to frame him for negligent homicide. "The boy would have been better off dead anyway," Rose continued. "And that idiot Howard wouldn't even know what hit him until the police arrested him. What about after? After what? After Howard went to prison and you collected the insurance money." Rose laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. "New ID, new country, new life. I've been planning my exit strategy for months. And me? You disappeared too, obviously. We couldn't risk you developing a conscience later." Julian's voice shook as he asked, "Did you ever feel guilty? Even a little? Guilty about what? Putting a sick child out of his misery? Freeing Howard from a burden he never wanted? I was doing everyone a favor, including yourself, especially myself. 3 years of playing stepmother to a wheezing brat. 3 years of pretending to love a man who bores me to tears." Rose's voice dripped with contempt. "Do you know what it's like to live with someone else's damaged child?" Howard closed his eyes, hearing his son reduced to cruel words in his wife's mouth. "The insurance money was just compensation for time served," Rose continued. $600,000 for 3 years of my life. Sounds fair to me." Detective Chase signaled his team. Police units moved in from 3 directions, surrounding the diner before Rose and Julian could reach their vehicles. "Rose Cameron Rourke, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud." Rose didn't struggle as they placed handcuffs on her wrists. Through the surveillance equipment, Howard heard her final words clearly. "I hope you're listening, Howard. This isn't personal, just business." Detective Chase made an unexpected suggestion during the booking process. "Howard, I've been thinking about the financial complexity of this case. The offshore accounts, shell companies, money laundering. We need someone who understands federal financial crime. You have forensic accountants. We do, but there's someone better for this specific situation." Chase paused, studying Howard's face. "Your father." Howard's entire body went rigid. "I don't have a father. Royce Rourke, retired federal compliance officer, specialized in tracking international money laundering operations. Lives alone about 20 miles outside Olympia. I haven't spoken to him in 15 years. Maybe it's time." Chase provided the address written on official police letterhead. Howard stared at the piece of paper, memories flooding back like poison. His father walking away when Howard was 12 years old. Foster homes that felt like warehouses for unwanted children. Learning that survival meant trusting only yourself. Why would he help? Because it's his grandson's life at stake. And because he spent 30 years putting people like Rose behind bars. Howard drove to the address in the late afternoon, his truck climbing winding roads through Douglas fir forests. The cabin appeared suddenly around a bend small, well-maintained, surrounded by native plants and a vegetable garden. Had a man in his 60s emerge from the front door before Howard could knock. Royce Rourke looked older than Howard remembered, his hair completely gray and his face weathered by years of solitude. But his eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had intimidated Howard as child. "Hello, Howard." "Royce." They studied each other across the front porch, 15 years of silence stretching between them. Royce looked genuinely older and somehow smaller than Howard's memory suggested. Detective Chase called, told me what happened to Mason. Since when do you care about Mason? Since I learned someone tried to kill my grandson. Howard wanted to walk away, to handle this crisis without the man who'd abandoned him when he needed protection most. But Mason's safety mattered more than old wounds. What do you know about financial crime? Royce gestured toward the cabin. Come inside. We have work to do. The interior surprised Howard. Instead of the cluttered bachelor dwelling he'd expected, the cabin was organized like a professional office. Computer equipment lined one wall, filing cabinets filled another, and legal documents covered a large table in the center. I've been freelance consulting since retirement, Royce explained, helping law enforcement track complex financial crimes. The next 8 hours changed Howard's understanding of Rose's planning. Royce traced her hidden accounts through 3 countries, identified the shell companies Julian had created, and mapped the money flow with the precision of someone who'd spent decades following similar trails. She's been planning this for over a year, Royce said finally, pointing to a complex flowchart covering his kitchen table. The life insurance was just the beginning. How much money total? Close to $2 million, positioned for immediate withdrawal once Mason died and you were arrested. She's got accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Howard stared at the financial charts, each connection representing another layer of betrayal. She was going to disappear completely. New identity, new passport, new life. You'd be in prison for negligent homicide while she lived comfortably on your son's death. How long would I have served? Royce consulted another document. With the evidence she planned to fabricate, 25 to life. Maybe death penalty if prosecutors decided Mason's death was premeditated. The room spun around Howard. Death penalty for murdering a child? Absolutely. They worked until midnight, organizing evidence and building a timeline of Rose's activities. Royce demonstrated the same methodical attention to detail that had made him successful in federal law enforcement. Why are you helping? Howard asked finally. Royce stopped typing and looked directly at his son. Because I failed you 15 years ago. I won't fail Mason. You didn't fail me. You abandoned me. Same thing. Royce closed his laptop. I was dealing with your mother's death badly. Drinking too much, working too many hours, avoiding the responsibilities of single parenthood. So you dumped me in foster care. So I made the worst decision of my life. Royce's voice carried genuine regret. I told myself you'd be better off with people who could take care of you properly. Really, I was just scared of screwing up your life worse than I already had. Howard studied his father's face, searching for signs of deception or manipulation. He found only tired honesty. Mason needs his family intact, Royce continued. I can't undo what I did to you, but I can make sure he never experiences that kind of abandonment. Julian agreed to cooperate under immunity after spending one night in county jail. His terror of Rose had finally overcome his greed and self-preservation instincts. She's completely detached from normal human emotion, he told Chase during his recorded interview. Talks about killing a child like she's discussing lunch options. Chase laid out the cooperation plan in detail. Julian would contact Rose, claim he had arranged transportation to Canada via private boat, and arrange a final meeting to coordinate their escape. She won't trust it, Julian protested, his hands shaking as he spoke. Rose doesn't trust anyone completely. She'll trust the money, Royce said quietly from his position at the conference table. Show her evidence that the funds are already moving. Make her believe the financial transfers are in progress. Detective Chase had positioned surveillance teams around Olympia's marina, where Julian suggested they meet. The location offered multiple escape routes by water, which would appeal to Rose's planning mentality. Howard waited in the surveillance van, listening to radio chatter as teams positioned themselves around Dock 7. Aubrey sat beside him, monitoring the financial tracking equipment Royce had set up. She's smart enough to suspect a trap, Aubrey said quietly. But greedy enough to take the risk, Howard replied. The meeting was scheduled for 10 p.m. after most recreational boaters had returned to shore. Rose arrived exactly on time, carrying a single black suitcase and moving with the confidence of someone whose plan was finally reaching fruition. She wore dark clothing and had pulled her hair back severely, transforming her appearance from suburban realtor to someone preparing for international flight. "You look nervous," she told Julian as they met near the boats. "This is a big step. Once we leave the country, we can never come back." "I never intended to come back." Rose glanced around the marina with professional alertness. "Where's the boat?" "Dock 9. The owner thinks we're a couple taking a romantic weekend trip to Vancouver." "And the money?" Julian showed Rose's phone displaying fake account balances that Royce had created. "First transfer completed an hour ago. Second transfer initiates once we're in international waters." Detective Chase's team recorded every word as Rose outlined her endgame strategy. She spoke without emotion, detailing how Mason would have died if Julian hadn't lost his nerve at the critical moment. The boy would have been better off dead anyway. Weak lungs, constant medical expenses, limited future prospects. Rose's voice carried casual cruelty. "I was putting him out of his misery. What about Howard? What about him? He'd have grieved for a few months, then realized how much easier his life became without a sick child draining his resources." Julian's voice shook as he asked, "Did you ever feel anything for them? Even friendship?" Rose laughed, the sound carrying clearly through the surveillance equipment. "I felt trapped. 3 years of playing house with a blue-collar worker and his damaged son. Do you know what my college friends think when I tell them about rescue inhalers and emergency room visits? You could have divorced him. And gotten what? Half of a warehouse worker's assets and no insurance money? This way, I get $600,000 in permanent freedom. From a child's death. From a burden that never should have been my responsibility." Rose checked her watch. "Howard knew the risks when he married someone from my background. I was never going to be a conventional stepmother." Detective Chase signaled his teams. Police officers moved in from 3 directions, surrounding Rose and Julian before they could board the boat. "Rose Camden Rourke, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and bribery of public officials." Rose didn't resist as they placed handcuffs on her wrists. She looked directly at the surveillance van where Howard sat listening. "I know you can hear me. Howard, I hope you understand this was never personal. Just practical business." Rose's arrest made the local news, but Howard wasn't satisfied with simple legal proceedings. He wanted the entire community to understand what she'd attempted and who she really was beneath her polished exterior. He gathered all the evidence security footage from the school, financial records showing the hidden accounts, transcripts of Rose's recorded confession, and delivered comprehensive packages to the Olympia Times, KOMO News, and 3 local television stations. "The community needs to know," Howard told Aubrey as they prepared the media packets. "Rose fooled everyone for 3 years. Her clients, her colleagues, even me. People should understand what kind of person they were trusting with their homes and their money." The story broke on Thursday morning with a front-page headline in the Olympia Times. "Local realtor charged in plot to kill stepson for insurance money." By afternoon, Rose's real estate office had received over 100 calls from clients demanding explanations. Her colleagues distanced themselves with remarkable speed, claiming they'd never really known Rose personally and had noticed concerning behavior in recent months. The office manager announced that Rose's client contracts will be transferred to other agents immediately. Howard read every article and watched every news segment, wanting Rose's reputation destroyed as completely as she tried to destroy his family. The coverage was thorough and damaging exactly what he'd hoped for. Rose's wealthy family attempted damage control, hiring expensive public relations consultants and calling in favors with local media outlets. But Howard had documented everything too thoroughly, and the evidence spoke for itself. The Seattle television stations picked up the story by Friday, running segments about the Olympia insurance plot during their evening news programs. Rose's photograph appeared alongside descriptions of her calculated planning and complete lack of remorse. "Think that's enough public humiliation?" Aubrey asked, pointing to the newspaper coverage spread across Howard's kitchen table. "For now, but I want everyone to remember her name." The trial lasted 3 weeks, and attracted media attention from across Washington state. Rose's defense attorneys argued for temporary insanity, claiming the stress of sudden stepmotherhood had driven her to desperate measures. The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney Sarah Martinez, systematically destroyed that argument. They presented Mason's journal documenting months of psychological manipulation, financial records showing deliberate planning over more than a year, and audio recordings of Rose's complete lack of remorse. Howard testified for 4 hours, describing his growing suspicions about Rose's behavior and the devastating moment when he realized she'd tried to murder his son. Mason, deemed too young to testify directly, provided written testimony through a court-appointed advocate. The jury deliberated for 6 hours across 2 days. When they returned to the courtroom, Rose showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, bribery of public officials, and child endangerment. Judge Patricia Harrison sentenced Rose to 22 years in prison without possibility of parole for the first 15 years. She addressed Rose directly during sentencing. You planned to murder a defenseless child for financial gain. You manipulated that child psychologically for months, causing psychological trauma that may last his entire lifetime. You attempted to frame an innocent man for your crimes, potentially destroying 2 lives for your personal benefit. This court finds your actions among the most callous and calculated we have encountered. Rose listened to her sentence with the same detached expression she'd maintained throughout the trial. She might have been hearing weather reports rather than learning she'd spend the next 2 decades in prison. Julian received 5 years in minimum security after his cooperation, though his business collapsed and his reputation was permanently destroyed. He left Olympia before sentencing was complete, fleeing to another state where his involvement in the plot was less well known. Howard received full custody of Mason without contest. The court also awarded them Rose's remaining assets, her share of the house, her savings accounts, and her interest in several investment properties. Partial compensation for the trauma she'd inflicted, though no amount of money could repair the psychological damage to Mason. Howard used Rose's money to purchase a small fabrication and auto repair shop on the outskirts of Olympia. The building needed work, but the location was perfect, close enough to town for customer convenience, far enough away for peace and quiet. Aubrey became his business partner, handling customer service and financial management, while Howard focused on the mechanical work. Her sharp wit and no-nonsense attitude attracted loyal customers who appreciated honest service and fair prices. Mason thrived in the shop environment. He did homework at the front desk, helped organize parts inventory, and learned basic mechanical skills from Howard. The physical work seemed to help him process the trauma of Rose's betrayal, though he continued seeing a therapist twice a week. "I like it here," Mason told Howard one evening as they closed up for the day. "It feels safe." "Good. That's the most important thing." The shop became Mason's second home and sanctuary. Customers grew accustomed to seeing the serious 10-year-old who could explain engine problems with scientific precision and showed genuine enthusiasm for learning how things worked. Roy surprised everyone by asking to help with the business. He moved a small travel trailer behind the shop and took over the bookkeeping, using his federal experience to ensure all financial practices remained completely legitimate. "Why stay?" Howard asked him one evening as they reviewed the day's receipts. "Because I have 15 years of fatherhood to make up for," Royce said simply. "And Mason needs to know he has family who won't abandon him." The arrangement worked better than Howard had expected. Royce's methodical approach balanced Howard's hands-on style, while Aubrey kept both men focused on customer service and business growth. Mason formed a strong bond with his grandfather, spending hours learning about financial planning and business management. Royce treated the boy with the patience and respect he'd never shown Howard, perhaps motivated by the knowledge that second chances were rare. 18 months after Rose's conviction, Howard received a letter from the Washington State Correctional Center for Women. Rose wanted to see him one final conversation before she disappeared into the prison system permanently. Howard almost threw the letter away. He'd moved beyond anger into something colder and more permanent. But Mason had been asking questions about Rose lately, wondering why someone who'd claimed to love them had tried to cause such devastating harm. Maybe closure would help them both. The visiting room at the women's correctional facility smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Rose sat across from Howard, separated by reinforced glass and connected by telephone handsets. Prison had aged her dramatically gray roots showing through her brown hair, lines around her eyes that expensive makeup had once concealed. "You look well," she said, her voice flat through the telephone's speaker. "Mason's doing well, if you're wondering." "I wasn't." Rose examined her fingernails with casual indifference. "How's the business?" "Growing. We're profitable." "Good for you." They sat in silence for several minutes, studying each other through the security glass. Rose looked smaller somehow, diminished by the institutional environment and orange jumpsuit. "Why did you want to see me?" Howard asked finally. "Curiosity, I suppose. I wanted to see if you'd figured it out yet." "Figured out what?" "Why it had to happen the way it did." Howard leaned forward slightly. "Enlighten me." Rose smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "You were never going to let me go, Howard. Not peacefully. You're the type of man who fights for things, even when they're not worth fighting for. Things like marriage. Things like control. You wanted a wife who'd play house with your sick son and pretend to be grateful for the opportunity." Rose's voice hardened. "I tried to be that person for 3 years. It nearly killed me. So you decided to kill Mason instead." "I decided to solve everyone's problems efficiently." Howard stared at his former wife, searching for any trace of humanity in her expression. He found only cold calculation. "Tell me you at least understand why I did it," Rose said finally. Howard stood up, hand moving toward the telephone to end the conversation. Then he stopped and looked directly into Rose's eyes. "I understand you thought I'd break. You were wrong." He hung up the phone and walked away, leaving Rose sitting alone behind the reinforced glass. Outside the prison, Howard called Mason from his truck. "Hey, Dad, how was your meeting?" "Finished. I'm coming home." "Good. Aubrey's teaching me how to use the accounting software. She says I'm a natural with numbers." Howard smiled, pulling out of the visitor parking lot. "I'll be there in 45 minutes. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. I'm glad you're my father. Really glad." Howard's throat tightened with emotion. "Me too, Mason. Me too." As he drove home through the Olympic Mountains toward Olympia, Howard reflected on the life they'd built from the ashes of Rose's betrayal. Mason was healthy, confident, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about his welfare. The shop provided steady income and meaningful work. Royce was slowly becoming the father Howard had needed 2 decades too late. Rose had tried to destroy them all to fund her escape to a new life. Instead, she'd given them the resources and motivation to build something better than what they'd lost. Justice, Howard realized, sometimes arrived in packages nobody expected. The mountains rose around him as he drove toward home, toward Mason and Aubrey and Royce, toward the quiet life he'd fought so hard to protect. Rose would spend the next 22 years thinking about her choices in a concrete cell. Howard would spend that same time watching his son grow into the remarkable man he was destined to become.